Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and I have the Nahida Math Guide 2 ready for you guys. Essentially, it's Nahida with Nilou as a off-field enabler. So we'll talk more about the usual details when I go into the comp. So you have the comp setup, the rotation, energy, and for the case of Bountiful Core, we will have the elemental application instances. Then you have the EM targets because of how Bountiful Cores work again. Special to Bountiful Cores, then the nodes and sanctions, Nahida main stats and artifact presentation, Quickswap, and artifact. Artifact comparison mainly will be main stat this time around. If there's a need to, I will do the full artifact comparison, no worries. And I have the TLDR. But before I go further in on all the details with regards to Nahida with Nilou, let's just do a very quick update for Nahida because we did do the Nahida Math Guide pretty early. So we have some new information since then as well as a beta version update. So first of all, the beta update added a textual description to her E on having increased resistance to interruption during her E aiming mode. So basically, I can tell you guys that she's uninterrupted even by Ruin Guard spinning attacks in her E aiming mode, but she still will take damage. Okay. Now, second beta update for Nahida is a good one. It's also textual description, but it's an important one because so far it's only in the Chinese text, but it added an additional line confirming that her Q works even if Nahida is off field. So this is really good because shortly after I did Math Guide 1, there were videos of beta testing showing that it works off field. But without official description change, you can't be sure whether it's a bug or is it really by design, right? So the good thing is it's now confirmed that it does work off field when Nahida is off field. So her Q buffs for the Pyro is the increased damage for her Trikarma, the Electro is the shortened cooldown for Trikarma, and Hydro is the increased Q duration. Okay, so all of this work even if Nahida is off field as long as your active character is within her Q, which in the first place is a huge area, so not an issue. So the main impact is that other than just being a 200 EM buff to the active character, you get those Q buffs. But this is an important thing to note, it doesn't change the fact that she's not a 100% off-field Dendro applicator, because you still need to swap her in to cast E whenever new enemies appear. So that's bad for Cyno. Okay. So for a Nilou Nahida comp, her Q duration is actually increased by her Q talent itself. So I can tell you essentially her Q just lasts longer than the rotation. If fully built. Okay? Because in the first place in a Nilou comp you would have 2 Hydro. There are also other information since Math Guide 1, so let me quickly go through them. So number 1, the Nahida link distance for her Sea of Kanda, which is the E marking, is pretty far. Go check out the video on it. It's very nice. When you see the link, it's like, wow. Okay? Oh, and apparently her whole E can harvest only capitals. So I guess it's only scarabs that she can't harvest, which is the one people want the most. But yeah. Okay, now the most important thing I want to talk about with regards to the new information is her Trikarma Dendro application. Because apparently in the current beta, there's a very there's something new here where there's actually 2 different server builds that are being tested across different beta testers. You have some testers having a version of Nahida with 1U and no ICD, versus another version where there's 2U with standard ICD for her Trikarma prop. So this is the 1U no ICD, so you always apply 1U every 1.9 seconds or 2U every 3.8 seconds, assuming no electro. Okay, so there's actually a video that was going around. It's the Hydro Abyss Mage, and people are using the Hydro Abyss Mage to show like the ICD of Nahida. So I know it looks like 1.5U on her Trikarma, but you gotta remember there is Aura tax. So 2U after Aura tax is actually 1.6. That's why it looks like 1.5U when you look at the video itself, especially when you look at how much of the shield HP was reduced. That is really 2U. Okay. So now it's either you have a longer duration, you apply double the amount of element, or you have a more frequent application, but it's 1U. I know 2U sounds like it opens up the option of 3 as hydro, right? But 3.8 second, it's a really long time. It may result in too much hydro. But I'll talk more about it when we go into the number of elemental application instances. But 1U no IC definitely feels safer in terms of ensuring hydro triggers. So maybe since it's Nahida will be more feasible with 3S Hydro, but I'll look into that further. In fact, I forgot to update this section. It should be, but I'll look into that later in this video because I really did look at it already. So it's actually not too bad. Now for Bloom Math in this video, we will go with 2S Dendro, 2S Hydro because that's the one that won the poll, right? I did a poll recently. So this comp is what people are most interested in. And for Agra spread comps, yeah, there is quite a difference between the 1U and 2U. Because 1U is actually pretty much double the amount of spreads. So that's awesome. So personally, I really hope that we get 1U no ICD. Yeah, 1U no ICD would be great. Okay, so that's in terms of all the updates that we have for Nahida since Math Guide 1. At least those that are more important in terms of the character optimization. So let's talk about Bloomcom itself. With regards to Bloomcom, it's pretty much the same as the Nilou Ophiel Bloomcom that I did, which is Nahida Math Guide 4. But Nahida is the Quickswap in this case, in this specific comp, and it's kind of sharing a driver role with Kokomi, although not exactly. I mean, we are not using normal attacks on Nahida, except if you have C6 Nahida. Okay. So let's go into the rotation itself. This is the rotation. You have the Nilou. Nilou is in outfield here. So Nahida, we start with Nahida action. Why? Because her Q lasts so long, and her E also lasts a long duration, and we're going to reapply the E. So that's why we start with Nahida EQ instead of DMC EQ. Then you have the Nilou E 4 times. So you set up the Bountiful Core. Sorry, excuse me. And then you have Nahida E. Okay? To reapply. Just in case. And also to interweave the Dendro and the Hydro. Okay? Nahida E, then you have the Kokomi E, then DMC EQ and Nilou Q. So you notice at this point in time, the DMC EQ along with the Nahida E procs, they should help to make it such that the Nilou Q, which is like 2U consumption or rather 1U of Dendro consumption, it's there. Okay? Because of this whole 0.5 thing. And then we do another Nahida E. Yeah, because with Bountiful Cores, you're going to be dishing out a lot of damage. It makes sense for your rotation to be able to constantly swap Nahida in to mark and apply Dendro. And finally, you have Kokomi Q with a reduced duration of her N to D, further reduced from the Nahida Math Guide, Nilou Math Guide 4. So a couple of notes here, we are making good use of Nahida's E short cooldown, yeah? Short CD, we are pretty much keeping it on CD the whole time. Now, as much as I would love to use Koole here instead of DMC for allergy, we kinda need Favonius procs for Nilou and Kokomi. Otherwise, their ER is going to shoot through the roof. It's pretty hard to build them in that way. Now, technically speaking, you can also use Koole, okay, with Favonius. And if you do that, you can actually shorten the rotation to 18 seconds. But it doesn't really make a difference unless you have C6 Nahida, you want to constantly you want to trigger her C6 effect as soon as possible. But other than that, I don't see that big of an issue. Because the Nilou Tranquility Aura... okay. One factor would be the Nilou Tranquility Aura, true. If you have C0 Nilou 18 second rotation does help you to do your Tranquility Aura earlier. So that's that. Okay. But as for the math here, I will be using DMC, Nahida, Nilou, Kokomi. Yep. So we do lose the allergy effect in favor of energy for Nilou and Kokomi, which also helps their stats anyway. So this is the rotation for C6, pretty straightforward, right? After the second Nahida E, after we have set up the Bountiful Core, then we do the C6 procs. And because of doing the C6 procs, Kokomi's N2D gets reduced. Okay, the N2 Kokomi action get reduced. So lower number of procs here. And I'll talk about it in the elemental application instances section. Let's talk about energy next. So energy is pretty straightforward, right? It's 161 ER on DMC, which is the bare minimum with Favonius. You have Nahida only having 100 ER, and even then her energy is she's getting more energy than her Q. There's no buffer at all. Okay. Oh, sorry. DMC should be higher. What am I doing here? My apologies. I was tweaking on this around later, so that's the reason why. Let me just quickly tweak this. Alright, sorry about that. It's 185 ER. Okay, not 161. The reason why I was at 161 initially was because of the I was actually doing 2 DMC procs, but I reduced it to 1 because of Nahida requiring more on-field time. If DMC does it twice, Kokomi's number of procs will be reduced further. So that's the reason why, right? Okay, so as I was saying, this is the ER values, okay? So you notice that in Nilou and Kokomi is pretty much the same. Kokomi is slightly higher because remember, Kokomi has slightly lesser on-field time this time. In this comp with Nahida taking up more on-field time. But because Nahida's on-field time is her E, we're actually getting more energy. That's why I can afford to drop 1 DMCE. And get 100 ER for Nahida, 160 for Nilou, same as per Nahida Math Guide 4, and 120 for Kokomi. So which means that if you have C4 Nilou, it's 120 ER instead of 160 ER. And if you want to lower your Nilou ER to 130, you can definitely do so by going for 2x DMCE. But just know that the rotation gets messier because your DMCE and Q has to be separate. Otherwise, your cooldown cannot meet. And you also reduce your Kokomi N2Ds and thus reducing your Bountiful Cores spawn. So by increasing your quality by a little, you end up reducing your quantity, which to me is a bigger impact. Okay, but depends on how you see it, right? If you prefer having higher quality damage, higher quality Bountiful Cores, it's like wanting more damage upfront per se. But yeah, it's an option that you can definitely do. Okay, but at least for my comp, I think that doing 1 at DMCE plus Favonius is good enough. It's preferred for my personal preference in order to optimize, because reducing Bountiful Cores to me is very, very detrimental to the Bountiful Core comms DPS. Right? Let's talk about the elemental applications. There's a number of it, because this is the one that's going to bring us to how we derive the number of blooms / Bountiful Cores. So we have pretty standard for Nilou. There's no change since the from the Nilou Math Guide 4. So it's either 10 or 13 if you have C1. For DMC, there is a bit of reduction. It's 6 in total instead of 7 because we do one less E. Makes sense, right? And then you have Nahida. So for Nahida, because we are doing her as a Quickswap, we are bringing her in to do her E 3 times, also to abuse the fact that her E on initial cast has no ICD. Not that it matters because anyway the cooldown is 5 seconds. Or sorry, 5 on press, 6 on hold. Then you have 10, I assume that that's 10 from her Q. Regardless of whether it's 2U every 3.8 seconds or 1U every 1.9 seconds, this 10 figures here holds. Because whatever figure that you see here is also equivalent to the number of U. Okay, then U in this case. And then you have the C6, you get 4 from C6. It's not just C6 because it's also the normal attacks, right? You can even use charge attacks if you want to drive even more of the procs. But at least for my math here, it's very simple. It's 13 Dendro instances or 17 if C6. And Kokomi gets it slightly reduced because normal attack actions are reduced, right? So that's that. So it's about 14 or 13. In fact, if I go by U, actually this should be 2. but that 2U still just procs 1. So yeah, this still holds, okay? So it's either 14 for Kokomi or 13 if Nahida has C6, because if Nahida has C6, you take away some of the Kokomi on field time. Alright? Thankfully, Nahida's attacks are actually pretty fast, her normal attacks. Okay, I'm going to try to go fast on this. So basically, one important thing to note is that obviously Nahida has the strongest Dendro application as the Dendro Archon, even if it's not on 100% of you, because you have 13 instances. Okay, DMC with 2Es is 7, Cole is 7 or 9. I can't remember exactly, but it's nowhere near Nahida's for sure. Not to mention Cole's Sprout is it's a small AoE, so that it's kind of conditional. Okay, so looking at all this, right, looking at the amount of Dendro instances that Nahida has, it kind of looks like Nahida main with more normal attacks may be able to produce more bountiful cores with triple hydro, but it's kind of risky, right? But essentially, if you think about it, right, a normal attack Nahida in a one Nahida with 3 hydros, I think it's not too much of a stretch to say that she can hit 20 or 22. If especially 22 is if she's C6, 22U, which means she can just support 40 to 44U of hydro if hydro is considered trigger, right? Because it's a 0.5 thing. Well, you also need enough hydro instances, obviously, for this. But it's doable, right? You have certain characters that are doable, you know, like Xingqiu or Yelan, with their whole long on-field time, long off-field Q procs. So if you look at Nilou C1 and Kokomi off-field, it's about 20 or 23 for C1 Nilou. Okay, so 20, if not 23 for C1 Nilou, that's what I mean. So if you think about it, right, in theory, Nahida can support the Hydro, right? And by supporting the Hydro, I mean that she can be the Dendro Aura constant applicator, while the other 3 Hydro characters are the Hydro triggers. But it is risky, because the moment your Hydro overtakes to become the Aura unit, your Bountiful Cores generation basically drops drastically to 20 to 22, which is basically assuming only from Nilou. Only from Nahida being the trigger. So it's 20 to 22 instead of 40 to 44, which honestly is still okay, right? Because even without Nahida in a Nilou comp, it was 22 to 23. In a 2S Dendro with Nahida, it's about 24 to 27 Bountiful Cores. So 2S Dendro with 2S Hydro, which is what we're doing here, is about 24 to 27 Bountiful Cores. 27 is the Nilou C1, 24 is Nilou C0. Okay, so even if you mess up, you still get the same as DMC plus Cole in Nilou comp, or very slightly lower than Nahida with 2S Dendro. But the difference is you get the chance to spawn 2x the Bountiful Cores, assuming the caveats are met, right? Like all your real enemies in range even after spawning, etc. So just refer to Nilou Math guides for details on the caveats, yeah? But to be fair, with such a high amount of hydro triggers, there's actually there may be a higher chance of hitting the 2 per 0.5 second per enemy limit, right? But it does require all of the hydro attacks to overlap, or at least 2 of them to overlap within the 0.5 second window. And I can tell you 0.5 seconds is actually very small of a window. It's half a dash time. So an example I can give you guys in a single target scenario will be for all 3 hydros to hit at pretty much the same time, that's 0.5 second window. So think of it this way, let's say a Yelan Q prop plus Nilou Tranquility Aura plus Kokomi all happening at the same time within that 0.5 second window. So it's, I don't know, in order to hit that, you have to be a little unlucky as well. Now, more importantly, as long as Nilou Tranquility Aura plus Kokomi doesn't overlap, I think it's still okay. Likewise for the Yelan or Xingqiu prop, right, which is anyway per second, as long as they don't coincide, I think it's okay. Now, worst case scenario, let's say we go for a worst case scenario, maybe 30 Bountiful Cores instead of 40 to 44. And I think I'm being very, very conservative or very, very prudent or cautious when I'm going for 30 instead of 40/44. And I think you have to be very, very unlucky to be 30 for it to be 30 Bountiful Cores instead of 40/44. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy, by the way. I'm just saying that, yeah, if we can find the right rotation, it should be more than 30 Bountiful Cores, especially if we don't end up having Dendro becoming the trigger. But even if Dendro becomes the trigger, you have 3 other Hydro, which will help make it such that Hydro, which I think it can work. Okay, sorry, which I think it can work because the Dendro application is pretty strong from Nahida as a on-field main. Yeah. And honestly, if you end up having your Trunculate Aura and Kokomi overlapping every proc, right, I'm very sure it's easily adjusted in rotation. Okay, it can be done. Now, 30 Bountiful Cores is still a significant amount of damage over 20. Okay, it's 50% more. It's huge difference. Even if you don't hit the theoretical maximum 40 plus, right? Even 30 plus is still very high damage. So you just need extra care not to put too much hydro in one go. For example, CCC Yelan combo. Like if you have a CCC Yelan, you go ahead and do your CCC Yelan combo. You're gonna lose your hydro trigger for sure. Okay, but I'm not saying that you can't use it. It really depends on your combat scenario, and it may be okay to do a couple of Dendro triggers to refresh the slate along with Nahida's high EM. But I need to test it out to be sure. Okay, like maybe the moment you see that Hydro overtakes, right? Do Nahida N1C. That's going to give you 2U of Dendro. It should be enough to switch it back to Dendro as the aura. But it's all in theory. It needs to be tested out. So for the 2S Dendro comp, for sure we have more than enough Dendro. So technically speaking, if you have Kokomi C1, you can utilize it. But I don't really recommend Kokomi constellations to begin with. So all in all, what I have been talking about here is not just about how many Bountiful Cores we can spawn in this comp. It's actually about the fact that after doing this analysis, I think that one Dendro 3S Hydro may actually be better for Nahida and Nilou Bloom comp in terms of the Bountiful Cores generation. Although there are other trade-off, right? Because once you go one Dendro, you actually lose 80 EM from Dendro Resonance and 60 EM, be it whether it's C4 Collate or DMC. You still lose that 60 EM. So it's more EM required on your Kokomi and also on the third Hydro. Which doesn't feel great because third Hydro, the options are looking like Yelan or Xingqiu, right? And both of them don't really benefit from EM. At least for Kokomi, or rather, okay, let me put it the other way. Both of them need their talent damage for them to be useful. Kokomi, on the other hand, still can serve as a Hydro applicator along with heals. Yeah? But I do believe, I think, based on a educated guess, it should still give you higher overall damage given how good Bountiful Cores are. And in case it wasn't clear, let me emphasize this. You should be going for Hydro triggers in 1S Dendro 3S Hydro. So the whole point of doing 1S Dendro 3S Hydro is to generate even more Bountiful Cores. It's not about only having one high EM character as a trigger. Okay. I've done all the Nilou Math guides. I'm trying to help people change their mindset. Okay, the whole point of doing the Nilou Bountiful Cores is also to build high EM on your characters. Okay. All four of them, if you don't have Nahida, if you know Nahida, you actually don't need to build on DMC. And I'll talk more about that in the very next section itself. And yeah, I mean, you can choose not to change your mindset. You can choose to try to force one EM stat than your character. But again, what happens? You are forcing yourself to 20/22 cores. Sure, you don't need to build EM on the rest of them. But remember what I was talking about, right? Nilou and all the new characters, they are all having some type of a EM buff, EM team buff. Although although it's not always available in terms of like being locked by constellations. At least not immediately available. But it's there. Okay. So if you really insist on doing like only one character with high EM and doing the Bountiful Cores, right? Number one, I don't think you're gonna enjoy the Bountiful Cores. Because the difference between your Bountiful Core working correctly with that high EM character triggering it versus when another character that doesn't have any high EM or very low EM, it's not gonna feel good. Okay, let me put it that way. You're gonna see like your Bountiful Cores damage having too much of a variance. I really don't recommend it. Not to mention, if you do one as Dendro with 3 as Hydro, and you try to generate this amount of cores, it's still going to be better damage. So like seriously, I've already gone through how to build EM on the other characters without having to sacrifice their core stats, or at least you still get their core stats, maybe a little bit of sacrifice, but you also get enough EM plus the team EM buffs to allow you to have decent enough EM along with Nilou's high HP for your Bountiful Cores to deal decent damage. And I've already gone through all of this in the Nilou Math guide, so please refer to that. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to talk about the EM targets. So previously in Nilou Math Guide 3, I already established this, right? You have 750 EM as a good minimum target for F2P players. Yeah, and that's with 300 EM from team buffs. So you have expanders, about 800 to 900 EM is a good minimum target with 537 from team buffs. And for wheels, you can go 1000 EM. And you get 786 EM from team buffs, which is just disgusting. Okay, now let's look at the updated EM team buffs now that we have removed Kole, right? Because we replaced Kole with Nahida. So what that means is that we lose our Kole's EM buff, which is 60. We also lose Allergy. But in return, we do get Nahida's 200 EM. Although it's only on the active character. So I'm actually not including in here. You see this 240 here does not include Nahida's 200 EM. Okay? And I'm not going to include it for my math. I will only include it for the moments where Nahida is on field and she's replying her E, and only for her talent damage, not for the Bountiful Core procs. Because your Hydro characters are going to be off field most of the time other than Kokomi. Yeah. In fact, the Nahida 200 EMQ, the biggest benefactor of it is, the biggest recipient of it is actually Kokomi at the last portion where you're doing her normal attacks. You actually do get the 200 EM, which I have actually excluded in my math. Okay, I have excluded it in my math. Let me repeat it. So, like I said, simplify things, I'll just exclude it. But if you think about it, right, Kokomi, most of Kokomi's, while she's doing the normal attacks, you will have the 200 EM. So spender wise, if you're a spender, if you get R1 Nahida signature weapon, that's 40, R1 Nilou signature base of 145. This is based on the stats that are permitted. The previous figure is slightly lower because that was based on the crit build, but we already said that EM build is better. So this is the EM build stats. So 425 EM. And view is not as high, right? Because we lose allergy. Okay, main loss is really allergy, I've got to say. So the updated summary is here. So you have 240, 425, and 591 as your team buffs. The targets don't change. Okay, because we already seen the damage, how it looks like. The targets don't change. What this means is that it's a little tougher for F2P players. So let's talk about building Kokomi's EM, right? So without Kole, you can see there's quite an impact for Spender and View and also even F2P. But this is still okay, because if you think about it, both Nahida and Nilou will build the EM naturally. DMC benefits from EM too, so you can build EM. So it's really only Kokomi, right? It's only really Kokomi that we need to invest in EM. So I would recommend either a 2 WT/GD plus 2 tenacity, so that's 80 EM and 20% HP, right? So you can go for that. Why? Because anyway, your normal attacks are slightly reduced. It's not like the previous it's not like the previous Nilou Math Guide 4 where she spends more on field time during her Q stunts. So I think you can afford to drop Clem. So I would recommend either 80 EM plus 20% HP, or within this permutation you can also go for EM instead with high HP percentage subsets. That's feasible too, if you really need to, which for F2P players you would. Okay, and even better, go for 2 Wanderers plus 2 GD. That's 160 EM just from the artifact bonus. Makes your life easier in terms of building EM. Now I know it feels bad to build EM on her, but what I've been trying to say is that you can still get high enough HP from her. Your heals will still be decent. Your damage will still be okay in terms of her normal attacks in Q stance mode. So honestly, you don't really need to go full EM. Okay? With the team buffs, you don't really need to. Obviously, if you get a signature weapon, it will help a lot, and I'll probably talk about that more when we do the Nilou weapon comparison. In fact, Nahida's weapon is for Nahida's EM. It gives Nahida a lot of EM as well. But I would think that if you want to talk about team buffs, Nilou's signature weapon is definitely the one to go for, if possible. Okay. So that's the EM targets. I hope this is all clear. And I can share with you guys, my Kokomi now has like, I kind of forget the figure. The overall figure I've forgotten, but I definitely have 800 EM even with 425 EM from team buffs. And I'm on 2 WT with 2 tenacity right now. Okay. And my EM stats are not the best. I'll just use whatever I can get. I can upgrade and I just used it. So my EM stats are not, there's room for improvement. That's what I'm trying to say here. So it's definitely doable. Although I fall under the spender category, right? Which is why I have given the alternative for non-spenders for F2Ps to go for EM instead with high HP percentage subset. If you have good enough EM subset rows, then you can go for this artifact permutation. Otherwise, you could go for this. Just think about it, right? 240 plus 187, it brings you a lot closer to the 425. It bridges that gap. It helps to bridge that gap by quite a bit. Not to forget, your EM target is also lower, right? Your minimum target. Okay, so anyway, I don't want to spend more time talking about this. I hope if you are still stubbornly going for the one stack EM, one character trigger kind of thing for a bountiful core, yeah, you do you. Okay, you do you. It's not like Hyper Bloom, because Hyper Bloom is very different. Hyper Bloom is very simple. You only need that one electro character to proc, or one electro sword to proc. So it's easy to control it. But Bloom is different. Okay, Bloom is different. Which is why I don't recommend going for one character only. Yeah, putting AOEs into a basket is very, very risky. Okay, I have quite a bit of notes and assumptions here. I'll try to go as fast as possible. So obviously signature weapon and a few other weaponizations used here. Nahida's ICD, I've actually gone through these previously, but I want to update based on what we know, right? Because Tri-Karma, there's 2 variants. I talked about it earlier in this video, the very first session. So 2U standard ICD cannot be reset with ECAS, so it applies Dendro every 3.8 seconds, or 1U no ICD, Dendro every 1.9 seconds. So we don't know which will eventually go live, right? We don't know because there's 2 different variants. And in terms of the Bountiful Cores, I will take the full number of Bountiful Cores, just like how we did it for Nilou Math Guide 3. If you want a justification, refer to Nilou Math Guide 3. And for the Bountiful Cores damage this time round, I'll do it even more specific. I'll do one group based on Kokomi procs and one group based on Nilou procs. And my Kokomi procs here assumes that we did not get the 200 EM buff. which we were when we are doing her normal attacks. So my math is already being conservative. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys here. My math is being conservative. Okay, you will get the 200 EM from Nahida's A passive, A1 passive, I think. Yeah, that's the A1 passive for Kokomi. At least in that about 5 to 6 seconds of on field time. Okay, which is still her procs are there. Okay, her procs are there. Let me just quickly go back here. Right, you have the NCD, NCD here, so it's like 4 procs, one from the queue. So you have 5 procs here that enjoy the plus 200 EM. And in fact, it's not just 5 because there's also from her E. And based on the duration, the E should also at least be 3 or 4. So effectively, what I'm trying to tell you guys here is that for Kokomi, actually more than half or almost, or it's either slightly more than half or half of her procs actually do enjoy the 200 EM. Okay, so it helps a lot in building her. But my math is just gonna assume that it doesn't. Just to make it even more conservative. Now for the EM targets for teammates, please refer to specification. We just went through it. Yeah, like I said, I've already excluded the 200 EM for Nahida on field Q buff, the A1 passive. For C4 Nahida, I'm also being conservative here. I will just assume one single enemy instead of 2 or 3 or 4 or average it to be 2 or whatever the case is. I'll just get a single enemy. So it's only 100 EM instead of 120, 140. Okay. Oh, and I did not include Nahida normal attack damage because she's Quickswap here, so the normal attack talent leveling is a waste in my opinion. Anyway, level 1 and normal attacks, I don't think it has much impact damage wise. I mean, it helps, it adds up, but I'm not including it. Okay. So all in all, what this means is that the damage figures that you see in my math should actually be higher. Should actually be higher because I have a lot of conservative assumptions. Although I do have one strong one, which is assuming full cost. Okay, but I can tell you guys that I'm more confident that this comp can achieve the full theoretical Bountiful Cores, 24 or 27, as opposed to the comp in Nilou Math Guide 4 because of how strong, because of the decent amount of Dendro application that Nahida provides, so that we can be assured that the Dendro is the aura. Okay. Okay, so before I go further, before we look at the overall damage, let's look at the different artifact condition, right, and her stats. So obviously signature weapon. Okay, my math is always based on the signature weapon first before we look at other weapons. And these are the stats. So her attack is this. In all of this, this is my standard template. So her attack is basically almost 1.5k. And these are the artifact permutation. You have all of it is 4 GD. I know that another option would be to go 2 GD/WT along with 2 deep wood, right? So you get 15% along with the ATEM. But for my math here, I'm gonna go 4 GD here. Okay, 4 GD here. Before I do the comparison, we just go with 4 GD first. Not saying that this might be the best. Maybe the 2 might be better. But we'll find out about that when we do the artifact comparison. Here mainly I'm gonna focus on the main stat. So you have EM damage CD, EM CD, EM attack CD. Why attack? Because I'm very sure there will be people who say that she gets a lot of damage bonus from Trikama, so you shouldn't use damage goblet. So I'll throw in the attack goblet here as well, okay? And you have the attack damage CD as well as attack CD. Why attack CD? Because she gets a lot of EM from team buffs. If you have both the signature weapon on Nahida and Nilou. So you see here, this is the EM from the artifacts. This includes the 180 EM from 4GD, and obviously the EM sense, any of the EM sense if there are. When you don't have any EM bin stat, this is the type of stats they are looking at. 180 from 4GD, and because there's no EM bin stat, right? So we assume you get 20 EM per base rule. So 5 artifact spins. 100. Now, obviously, this is very ideal. So there is a bit of discount involved when you depending on how your stats eventually turn out. But it is a feasible target, okay? It's not too bad of a target. So look at all the different EM sources. For Nahida, she actually gets a lot of EM from her kit plus her signature weapon. And then you have Nilou giving out a lot of EM team buff. Okay? This is with R1 Nilou. This is with R5 Nilou, 403 versus 245. And then you have the EM from weapon for Nahida. This is for Nahida. So you see here, Nahida easily goes beyond 1k EM. Even if I go attack sense, right, I still have 1k EM with R1. Okay? And these are the CRCD stats. This is before her passive. So for a Tri-Karma, you can add a 24 CR here, which makes it like 80 CR, which is why I'm going for it. I'm only going for 57 CR here. Because Tri-Karma is her main source for damage. Alright, because she doesn't have crit stat weapon or crit ascension stat, naturally the crit damage and CR is not going to be that high. But it's okay because it kind of balance off from based on how her kit works. Oh, and the EI is just the base value. Okay, so I don't want to waste further time looking at all the stats. Let's look at the damage itself. I hope that was a good enough look for you guys to appreciate. Now, this is the damage. This obviously includes the Bountiful Cores. So against one enemy, this is the type of damage you are looking at. C0R1 Nahida with C0R1 Nilou. Get this amount of damage. Oh, and FYI, I'm not using 1244 EM for Bountiful Cores, okay? I'm using 844 EM for the Bountiful Cores for Kokomi. See, I said here, right? Kokomi, based on the Kokomi procs, half of it is 844 EM. The other half is Nilou is 110 EM. I'm not even using the 1244 EM here. The 1244 and the 1434 EM here is for Nahida's talent damage. Okay? Let's make it clear. It's for Nahida's talent damage. And yet, with that, she's still doing 1 million at C0 R1. And if you have two enemies, it's 1.79 million. So yeah, it's 1.03 million at C0 R1, 1.51 million at C2 R1, which is here. These two figures. So this is if you compare it against the Nilou Math Guide 4, it's 774k at C0 R1 and 937k at C2 R1 with Cole instead of Nahida. Against two enemies, the damage is increased to 1.79 million at C0 R1 and 2.71 million. I have a typo here. 2.71 million. My bad. Okay, at C2 R1. And this is versus the 1.51 million and 1.83 million when you have Cole instead of Nahida. But to be fair, the damage difference, you see that it being that big is also partly because of Nahida's talent damage. And I am assuming that when you have C0 R1 Nahida, you have C0 R1 Nilou. Okay? That's my math in order for me to simplify. C2 R1 Nahida will have C2 R1 Nilou. Just making them equivalent so that I can more easily do the math per se. So really the big damage difference you see is the talent damage on Nahida's side. That's number one. And also because Nilou's damage in off is low. That's why you see the figure having a bigger discrepancy. But just bear in mind that we are also not using Nahida as the main here. Most of her damage is also off field actually. Okay. Now same thing, since the majority of the damage is elemental reaction, your variance between actual and interior crafting can be bigger than usual. But with this much Dendro application for Nahida, I'm fairly confident that we can maintain the Dendro aura and get 100% Hydro triggers. So realistically speaking, okay, these are the caveats. I've already gone through this in previous math guides, so I don't want to talk about it. You can read it, you can pause and read it if you want to, but we already talked about how the caveats are like. So see the damage here is really pretty good. Okay, it's it's higher than previous Nilou Math Guide 4 because we factor in Nahida's damage along with more Bountiful Cores, right? We have more Bountiful Cores because of Nilou's longer duration of Dendro. Yeah, and you thought that it was high previously, right? Okay, so just a quick one in terms of the main stat artifact comparison. So you see that attack damage CD is actually the best, not EM sense. See here? But EM sense is actually very close. Okay, it's very, very close. So I know it's interesting that attack sense is better than EM sense for someone like Nahida. But you gotta remember, when I was going through the stats for you guys, we have 1077 EM because of Nilou's and Nahida's signature weapon. So even with an attack without any EM being stat, right, I can still hit 1077 EM. It doesn't require R5 weapon, okay? Only R1. So I've showed the breakdown earlier, but let me just show you again, okay? Let me just show you again. You have 80 EM from Dendro Resonance, which you pretty much get most of the time. You 16 EM from DMC, you get it most of the time as well, within the rotation, majority of the time. You have Nahida Ascension EM, that's always there. Nilou A1 EM bonus, always there as well, because of how it works. Nilou Weapon Effect, always there as well. And then you have the EM from Weapon, for Nahida signature weapon, it's always there too. So bear in mind the 1077 does not include C4 Nahida. If you include C4, then it's 1177. So it's really just the Nilou signature weapon. And of course the Nahida signature weapon. But Nahida signature weapon is not so bad. I mean, you can use something like Sacrificial Fragment, I guess, if you really want the EM. Okay, so it's okay. It's manageable. I'll do a more in-depth look to see how big the impact is for F2P players when you don't have the signature weapon. But at least when you have both of the signature weapon, your EM is already hitting 1k without the EM main stat. That's really good, right? But since EM damage CD is only 0.5% lower, I'll say it's still better to go for EM sense, just to allow flexibility, because you may not always use Nahida with Nilou, right? But if you are dead set on Nahida always being with Nilou in a Bloom comp, and you have a good attack sense, then with this information you know that you don't need to farm EM sense. You don't need to try to try hard for the EM sense, assuming you do have the 1k EM, which I've shown you guys is very feasible. Okay, 1077 EM is assuming you have 5 base EM rows. Let's say I don't have 5 base EM rows, okay, I only have 1. Across your 5 are there, only one of them has a base EM stat. That's still 1k. That is still 1k EM because this is 1077, which is like 1080, right? So that's 4 rows that I can afford not to have. And I'll still have 1k EM. That works for her A4 passive. And that works for her both her A1 and A4 passive for that matter. So I can tell you guys, for all other permutations, it's all worse off, right? They are all red. And you can see that damage goblet is still better for Nahida. You realize that damage goblet options are always much higher than the rest of them. Because this is obviously assumed that you already have 1k EM. If you are desperate to get 1k EM, or if you need EM goblet to get the 1k EM, just know that damage goblet is still better for Nahida's damage. I've said this many times, okay? You need a lot of damage percentage for damage goblet to actually do worse than the main stat that the character skills on. But I can definitely understand if F2P players you need a EM goblet. But where possible, if you don't, then it will be great for it will be better for your Nahida. Okay? Just so you know. Oh, in case it isn't clear, even though I've said it many times, okay? Nahida is not triggering Bloom here. The Hydro characters are. because the hydro triggers consume less unit gauge, so you get to generate more bountiful cores that way. That's what we are trying to do here. Okay. Now this is a Quickswap comp. Technically speaking, you may try to use Nilou as a main in a 2S Dendro 2S Hydro comp, but I cannot guarantee that it will give you what you're thinking of in terms of the EM procs. Like, it's still not gonna be the case like Hyper Bloom, where you pretty much can ensure that Hyper Bloom is always triggered by a high EM character. It's just different the way these two reaction comp works. Alright? So let's go into the TLDR itself. Still 50 minutes. Okay, so this is the rotation. I'm not going to go through in detail. Refer to the specific section for details. Okay. Energy wise, due to Nahida Quickswap style and the need to reapply her E, she can actually work with 100 ER. With Nahida, her Dendro application has a long enough duration such that we are able to achieve 24 or 27 blooms. 24 blooms or 27 with C1 Nilou, which is actually very close to the theoretical 24 or 28 mentioned previously in the Nilou Math Guide 4. The reason why it's one lesser is simply because Nahida takes up slightly more on field time, so your Kokomi generates a little less procs. Now, YS Dendro 3S Hydro does have the potential to almost double the number of bountiful cores, or at least 50% more, right? If you want to be realistic or conservative in the estimate. So I think it's worth considering, even if you get lower EM team buffs. So for my math here, it's still the 2S Dendro 2S Hydro since it won the poll. But I may eventually move on to do 1S Dendro 3S Hydro. Let's see how that goes. I do want to look into Agra spread first. Okay. So please refer to the Elemental Application Instances section if you want to know the details on this. How I came out with all this. Refer to the section itself. And as for the important notes and assumption, the Nahida main stats are different version. Again, check out those specific for details because I'm not going to do TLDR for those. So in terms of updated EM targets, the targets actually don't change. What changes is the team buff that you have. So yeah, it's kind of harder. You kind of need more EM investment from artifacts. But please refer to the EM target section of building Kokomi's EM. If you think that 844 or 750 EM is too much investment, refer to that. Okay, I actually break it down and I give her my recommendation on how to get more EM on her. Let's talk about Nahida with the full damage analysis. So if your top bountiful cores damage was high already, based on my math guides on Nilou, check this out. Against one enemy, with Nahida Quickswap, you get 1.03 million at C0R1, 1.51 million at C2R1, which is a huge boost, okay? Versus 774k at C0R1 and 937k at C2R1 with Kole instead of Nahida. Against two enemies, the damage is 1.79 million at C0R1 and 2.71 million at C2R1. Versus previously 1.51 and 1.83 when we did not have Nahida. So, but just to note, the reason why the figures look so high, especially at 1C2R1, is also because I'm assuming Nahida and Nilou are equivalent here. I.e., when you have a C0R1 Nahida, you have a C0R1 Nilou. When you have a C2R1 Nahida, you have a C2R1 Nilou. That's what I'm trying to do here to simplify my math. I can tell you the biggest contributor of the difference, right, is still Nahida's damage, the Yelan damage itself. And you can argue that, oh, of course, because Nilou's damage in offense is low, right? But Nahida is also, I'm not using her as a main here. She's not doing any normal attacks, except in C6. Okay, so I hope this shows you guys how good Bountiful Core damage is with our dear beloved Dendro, Archon, and Nilou. Oh, and one last note. Okay, actually not exactly the last note, but we are reaching the last note soon. C6 value is not that great for Nahida in a Bountiful Core comp because of how Bountiful Core skills and how it works. So to maximize the Bountiful Core damage, right, it's actually very low spender friendly. I don't want to say F2P friendly, I'll say low spender friendly. Okay, so you actually just need C2R1 of Nahida and Nilou in terms of maximizing. If you don't want to maximize, and if you're a low spender, you get a C0R1 Nahida and a C0R1 Nilou. That's still a very, very good performance. Still 1.03 million. Now, if you can spend more, obviously you can get R5 Nilou signature weapon, but it's not really necessary per se. It makes your life easier in terms of building your artifact stats, for sure. That's not necessary. So I would expect that for Agra spread, the C6 value for Nahida will be bigger. But to me, one problem I see for her C6 is that her A4 passive doesn't seem to work for the C6 prot, at least description wise. And it's a huge difference in terms of the damage, because her C6 effect, the direct comparison would be level 12 Trikarma. And without that A4 passive, I can already see the damage difference being really big. It's like 37k versus 20k. So yeah, it feels really bad for her C6. So I really hope that the passive does work on her C6 by design. Maybe it's just a description issue. Maybe it works, but it's a description issue, like how her Q off you thingy is. But yeah, let's see how that goes. One last note, which is the artifact comparison. Okay, I'll recommend going for EM sense. Unless you're dead set on Nahida always being with Nilou in Bloomcom and you have a good attack sense, then you don't need to find EM sense, assuming you have the 1k EM. As for how to get 1k EM without EM sense, please refer to a specific section. As for all the other main stat permutation, they are all worse off. Okay, damage goblet is always better for Nahida, especially if you already have 1k EM, so you don't need to build more EM for your passives. Now, if you need EM goblet to get 1k EM, go for it. Okay, just go for it. But I just want you to know that the damage goblet is still better if you're able to get more EM substats on the other pieces. But it's tricky for Nahida because she also needs crit stats if you want to make her more flexible. Yeah, it's kind of tricky in that way. So I do understand for Nahida. Okay, but at least for Nahida, sacrificial fragments exist. That weapon gives you a lot of EM, so it helps. Okay, it does help. And not to mention, I have not included the 200 EM at all from her Q effect, at least for Bountiful Cores. So in case it, also for this 1k EM thing, okay, also for this 1k EM thing, it doesn't include her 200 EM Q buff. So in case it still isn't clear, let me repeat it again. Okay, Nahida is not triggering Bloom here. The Hydro characters are, because Hydro triggers consume less unique H, i.e. more Bountiful Cores. So the artifact comparison above is for her talent damage. Okay. Alright, now that brings me to the end of this video. We have the Nahida video series. I've already completed the kit analysis. We have completed Nilou with Nahida in a 2S Dendro, 2S Hydro setup. So now, what I'll probably do next will be Nahida in Agra spread, and then I'll resume the Nilou series, weapon comparison, constellation set refinement comparison, especially since we are getting Nilou next Friday, if I didn't remember wrongly. So next video, Nahida Agra spread. After that, it will be the Nilou series. Then when we finish the Nilou series, we'll come back to Nahida. I'll probably look at Nahida with Nilou in 1S Dendro 3S Hydrocom. We'll do weapon specific math as well, and the usual stuff. Okay, wait, I forgot to add. There should be an artifact comparison here. Between the artifact comparison and weapon, I'm not sure which will come first. Let's see how that goes. Okay, let me just add it in here. So I know it's a long video again, but I hope the analysis that I've given to you guys is helpful to you guys. Okay, if you like the content, remember video and click subscribe for more. I really appreciate your effort in going through this, in understanding this. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.